Thank you, everybody. So Carolina, who's the co-chair of our committees, her and I will be presenting today. We have 24 people on our task force, which has been like pretty fair size, I'd say, to coordinate. But it's been very good and very rich and very helpful, and people worked very hard. We're one of the groups that has agreed to continue working on these issues and fleshing them out more. So some of the stuff that you're seeing today is still preliminary, and it's not completely final because we're still working on it, and we're going to continue to work on it. So the one thing that we started out with was wanting to really understand what are the needs and the people that we need to serve with addressing housing issues. So we spent some really good time breaking it down into the whole, what we call the continuum of housing, so that we're looking at from people who are homeless or threatened to be homeless, preventing that, helping people escape homelessness, to making sure there's adequate rental housing for low-income people in the workforce, and that there's home ownership opportunities and a way to help people stay in the homes they already live in. So we looked at this whole continuum, and everything was informed by that, right? And this is really important. It's a really important point. It's a simple point, but it's an important point in that, if we're going to be successful at getting people out of homelessness, that means there needs to be a place that they can move into, permanent housing they can move into. That's typically rental at the beginning. So that creates new demand for rental housing. On the other hand, every time somebody buys a home, it means a rental unit freed up. You didn't have to build a new unit, it freed up, and there's an opportunity for somebody else. So paying attention to how the continuum works, you're going to address housing more comprehensively if we're paying attention of how the interaction works and encourage mobility through the housing spectrum. So that's kind of informing our overall strategic thinking on that. Homeless area is, so we broke down each of those areas and say, what are things we need to focus on? And in the homelessness, I'll let Carol talk about this more, but we looked at 3 key areas that we think are really key to focus on. One is that there's support services for people that are homeless. 2 is that there's housing assistance. Oh, can you hear me okay? Oh, that's better. That there's rental assistance that goes with the person, that follows the person, so like rent vouchers, emergency vouchers, that kind of thing. And there's rental units that they can use those vouchers in or can get into. Do you want to say more about that, Carol?
No, I think when we're taking a look at it, what we really wanted to focus on is that housing for all. And so that really does go with the continuum of those that don't have housing. It's also over the age group, and that is that for newborns as well as those that are aging and choose to live in place. And also taking a look at what is it that housing does within our community. And I have a couple of statements that I've been using for years. Our agency is the Lifelink, and we focus on folks with significant barriers of behavioral health, but it goes across all areas. Housing is health. Housing addresses social determinants, and housing brings revenue to the economy of the location where they are. So I wanted to make sure everyone, housing is vital, it's important. It's interesting that over the last few months, all of us have come across articles about other communities using the term housing crisis. And it's like someone woke up one day and realized they didn't have a place to live or they didn't have a place to rent. So we are delighted, and I thank the mayor and everyone who has been really involved in this to recognize that this was a real significant issue to be addressed by our community.
Thanks, Carol. And one thing Carol just reminded me of in her comments is that this is so interconnected that one of the challenges that the groups that are working with homelessness and people with behavioral health problems is attracting social workers to live in Santa Fe, but they can't afford to live here. So and they need a market rate rental or a home to buy. So all of this stuff gets interconnected. We got to address the whole thing, and it's something I know Simon, who practically from the chamber, is very focused on making sure we have employment growth in Santa Fe for the first time in a long time. That's a really good thing. The big challenge now is where they live. So we got to pay attention to this whole spectrum of housing. So that gets us to the rental thing. And so we're very clear. There's a huge need for affordable rental for people who are very low income, but there's also a need for market rate rental housing for that workforce that is going to be employed by healthcare, which is growing a lot, or and other kind of job growth that's happening. So we focused on the need for market rate rental, subsidized affordable rental for people who can't afford market rate, and again, making sure we deploy the housing vouchers and things that are rental assistance that are out there already. And we've had last year, I understand we actually gave up some rental vouchers because there weren't apartments that would accept them. So we have to address both sides of that. And then the last area is home ownership, which is something I work with HomeWise that we do a lot of. But that includes building new homes because we have a housing shortage there. It involves down payment assistance so people can overcome that barrier to be able to purchase a home. Low interest mortgages that help make it more affordable. And then there's this whole side that I don't think we spend enough time on, which is home repair and home improvements to help people keep their homes. And it's a lot cheaper to fix the roof on a house than wait for it to be a $40,000 rehab because we didn't fix it right away. It's also important when it comes to what's happening with the, seniors. The whole big trend is seniors want to age in place and stay in the house they have. So can we enhance those homes to make it more livable? So that's another aspect of that continuum. So when we look at that, so that's the kind of the neat part, what we need to address part. How do we do this, and what can this? So we really focus. What can the city do? Since this is making recommendations to the city. So we have three big areas. One is finance and funding of housing. Second is there's how to deploy city-owned or city-controlled land to that benefit, because there's quite a bit of it actually. And then what kind of city policy could make this, policy changes could make this easier. So under funding and finance, and this is, you have this handout, but one is we have an affordable housing trust fund, and this is something that I think is important to recognize. The city has done a lot of really good stuff over many years on affordable housing. The city's actually not just a leader in the state. Santa Fe is considered a leader in the country on affordable housing stuff. So we have one of the best inclusionary zoning ordinances that require affordable housing. Rebecca Wurzberger, who was on the city council, was part of, when she was on the city council, helped pass that a long time ago. So we also have something that's called the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but the problem with it is the funding for it is episodic and not predictable. And what we really think we need to do is figure out a predictable, dedicated revenue stream so we know there's a certain amount of money going to be in there. Because if you're developing new housing, timelines are long, and you need to know, a developer needs to know that there's a chance at least to be able to apply for that funding. And right now you can't, there's no predictability to it at all. So that's the challenge, is where to find that revenue stream. We want to strategically deploy the money we do have. We have some federal money that the city gets for affordable housing and other sources that has been, I think, deployed effectively. We want to make sure we stay on top of that and deploy it strategically. Another idea that's a new idea, and I'll let Carol talk about it too, is this idea of having city contracts be available for certain services the city are providing anyway, like park maintenance or something like that, where they could contract with a social enterprise that employs formerly homeless people, so that there's another way to pay for that, so it's not just coming out of social service or charitable money. Do you want to talk about that?
With the city funding that we have received, the LifeLink was able to establish a program called Better Ways Santa Fe, and we are really have been blessed with having just some great articles that have been in the newspaper talking about it. And what it is that individuals who are homeless or at risk for homelessness or extreme low income will gather, and they do different work throughout the city. The first focus was on the Arts and Design campus, so they would do cleanup there. And as a part of that, there was also supported employment initiatives that started working with the individuals. How do you do a resume? What does work all about? And most of the individuals that have been participating, what they get to experience is immediate reward in that after they do their work, they are paid right then. And so it is also a time for socialization between the two of the individuals who are there. And one of the staff that oversees the program shared with me that he has worked with this particular individual who had a lot of behavioral health barriers for over a year and saw a lot of the barriers not really be able to be addressed. And he said when they got out and were in the workplace, they were out doing what they were doing, he was absolutely amazed at how the interactions amongst the individuals, they shared stories that had nothing to do with their health issues or the behavioral health, their mental illness or their substance problems. They shared just who they were as individuals. And we have, over a short period of time, this project has only been going since March, and already 3 individuals have sustained competitive or employment that will sustain them, and they will be self-sufficient. It is absolutely amazing. We are hoping that we can actually expand it to reach other types of employment opportunities that these individuals can take advantage of.
So I think it's a really exciting thing if we can continue to grow that. Getting people in permanent employment who were homeless helps people escape homelessness, not just tolerate it. So I think it's really important work that Carol's doing on that. The last thing on the financial thing is to create like a venture capital fund for housing, so that there's money that we can invest as a community into things like Carol would like to buy another 8-unit building she was telling me about. Well, real estate transactions don't wait for your capital campaign to be done. You got to go take advantage of that opportunity and then raise money for it. So we need a way to be able to move quicker to take advantage of affordable housing opportunities. The other area is city-owned land and city-controlled land. The most obvious one is the University of Art and Design, 60-something acres, huge opportunity to do some housing stuff there that could be mixed with mixed uses of other kinds of things and a mixed income. Huge opportunity there. But there's other things. There's smaller city parcels of land, famously that you read about in the paper, the handball court that didn't get approved for a project. But we think that if we use the transparent RFP process to donate those kinds of smaller parcels for affordable housing, that may be a way to unleash that opportunity. There's other big city parcels that we think there needs to be some strategic thinking about, like the Seiler Road area that has 52 acres. What's the future of that? And that there needs to be some strategic planning around that. One that's a really interesting one, I think, to all of us is the Water Street parking, surface parking lot downtown. Like, why is there a surface parking lot downtown? It makes no sense. But could we do something there that would be something that added actually to the vitality of downtown? But maybe there could be a housing opportunity there too, because we all think people living downtown would be a good thing. On the policy front, last thing on the land thing, and it's not in the handout because I forgot to put it in there. Got 5 minutes right here. So is Tierra Contenta, which most of you know about, it's been a huge success, and that's another example of the city taking really bold leadership for affordable housing. But it's been kind of stuck post-recession, and we just need to get that moving again. There's a lot of opportunity to get some stuff done there. On the policy front, one thing that's really cool about the Santa Fe School of Art and Design area and that whole St. Mike's is they created this Midtown Link zoning overlay that allows for real flexible mixed use and higher density affordable housing. We think that's an approach that we should look at other parts of the city. Like maybe the Seiler Road area would be appropriate for that approach. That could be a game changer, we think. We think making mixed use easier is really important, because one of the problems in affordable housing is sometimes people say, well, I don't know if I want that project in my neighborhood, but we don't have the ability to say, well, yeah, but what if we also included a store or a park or something that would be an amenity for the existing neighborhood. So it's not just, they're not going to benefit from the apartments necessarily, they already have a place to live. But what about other things that would benefit the neighborhood so it's more attractive, and we're looking at the livability of the whole neighborhood. And that's important. And then last thing here is, well, one is make the development process more efficient. And we got a lot of really good nerdy ideas on how to make the development review process more efficient. But I'm not going to bore you with that. And then the last thing, which I think we're all really excited about, is can we help homeowners add accessory dwelling units, make that easier for them, right? Because it solves a bunch of problems. It's rental housing. It oftentimes ends up being really affordable because people build a relationship. And we, at HomeWise, we get people all the time who are applying to buy a home, and they're moving out of what they used to pay $500 a month for an apartment near downtown because it's in a guest house. It's like, well, how's that so cheap? Well, because we really like each other. So my landlord's never raised the rent on me, right? So it's like, so there's this human dimension to it that we think is a really good thing. It also does things like helps in aging in place, right? So a caretaker can live there, or you have your parents move in, so you can take care of them, but you don't necessarily want them in the same house. But you can put them in well, I mean, and they may not want to be in the same house. And my mom and I couldn't live in the same house because she smokes like a chimney, and I couldn't handle it. So I think these kinds of things it's a really good human scale way to do this, and there's some issues that make it difficult to do that. And we think that's an opportunity. And other cities like Seattle and Portland have really done a great job of making that kind of housing more accessible. So those are our main recommendations.
We were just really blessed to have a great number of individuals who have a real passion for housing, whether it's building, whether it's making rental home ownership. It's also, we had presidents of banks that were part of this group. It was very exciting to hear. And I think one of the things that we addressed is the fact that it was from all of those aspects of where people are homeless, need to have a subsidy because of barriers to being self-sufficient. They will always be on either fixed income or very low income. But to be able to integrate them within the communities around the city, not isolate them, not make them be in what we used to refer to as this is the poor section, this is the other section. They need to be integrated. Folks that have behavioral health barriers with supportive services can do very well. It is always disturbing to me. There is one incident and it gets so much press and so much negative comments, but no one ever talks about the other 95 or 96% of individuals with barriers that are doing well. They just need to have some services that are supportive. Also, I think that it's important for us to start looking at, we need to be innovative. Not everyone wants to live in what we have always described as a 2 or 3 bedroom little box house. Being innovative in terms of what are some newer ways of doing things. Some communities have looked at, I've learned real fast that folks don't like that term tiny house unless they're just building it for display. But there are cottages, there are ways of doing that. Being able to help individuals that have a dwelling that could be a rental housing, but they cannot pass the HQS or the housing quality standards because they need to have something that is not really expensive done. And so it was interesting for our groups to, different ones popped up and said, well, we could probably help with that. We could put together some sort of a little low income or low interest or no interest way of being able to do that to expand what we need within the community. We still need to build, but we can take advantage of what is already there.
We're done.
Okay. Again, if you have questions, please write them down on the cards and hold them up, and we'll collect them. And now the mayor is going to have some questions.
Couple things. Thank you both. That's Mike, you and your co-chair, Carol, you did a super job. You had 24 people to work with on this committee. Was also, or this working group. It was also the first working group that we chartered, because I think the notion that there is a housing crisis is evident to all of us. I was just back in Boston at the Conference of Mayors gathering. Every mayor is talking about this. The mayor of Seattle was there. She talked about the fact that they are the beneficiaries of so much success that the mean cost of a house in Seattle is now $845,000. The rest of the people, other mayors, made the exact same noise that you all just made. This is what happens, when you look at these policy areas. You look at our economy, you look at our education needs, you look at our housing needs. They all play into each other. We want a growing economy. We want people to live and work here. We need to be able to have housing for everybody. I also want to recognize, before we go any further, Councilor Villarreal is here. Thank you for joining us. I know you have a deep and abiding interest in all of these issues, but you also have a housing summit coming up on the 30th at 9 a.m. at the Santa Fe Art Institute. Everybody's welcome. Please go to that. If housing is something you agree is a crisis for our community, that's another gathering you'll want to go to. You've got some, you've covered a lot of important issues, and I don't want to suggest any are less or more important than the others. If you could expand on a couple of points. One is the first bullet point is adequate and predictable funding to affordable housing, so that the Affordable Housing Trust can have a predictable way of going forward. Any further drilling down on that? And also, you mentioned the measures that have been successfully implemented in other communities, including Los Angeles, Mayor Garcetti, accessory dwelling units. Let's talk about money and kind of infill community ADUs across the city. And by the way, before I go any, I also want to point out you were absolutely right in saying how much great work is done by the city and by the city team. And Alex and her team are here this morning, and hats off to you all for having championed this for such a long time. This is work that Mike and his team and Carol and the group built on all of the work that's already been done.
Yeah. So what I'd say on the money part is that the city has done, and under Alexandra Ladd's team in the Affordable Housing Office, has done a really good job of using community development block grant money and other kind of federal sources, and the local Affordable Housing Trust Fund, I think, has very strategically deployed that money with a very good process for affordable housing. I think that's working. The problem with it is we don't have enough of it, and especially the flexible kind of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund money. What's good about that is it doesn't have all this federal red tape to it, so it's way more flexible. So finding a stream of money that's predictable for that would be a big deal. So the big issue is, where does that come from? Well, one idea, which I think is very doable, is you say affordable housing is a priority for CIP or capital improvement program funding, which we do at least every couple years. We've done this before in Santa Fe, where we put some of that money in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The limitation is it has to be used for infrastructure that the city owns to support affordable housing. But that's not hard, because affordable housing needs roads and sewers and public infrastructure, and offsetting some of those costs to support affordable housing is a big deal. So if we said we're going to take 10% of that of CIP money and dedicate it to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, that could be $2 million right there to help support infrastructure for it. The stuff that's harder is, where is there a new revenue source that would be predictable? Obviously there's been ideas of doing a GO bond, which would would be funded with the property taxes. You could also do it with gross receipts taxes. Although many of us are concerned about GRT, it's already high in Santa Fe, and it's probably one of the most regressive taxes you can have. So not as much enthusiasm for that probably. But what about, then there's some other ideas that came up that came out of the task force that was in our discussions of what if you did have an extra kind of fee on short-term rentals, and there's a nexus there. The short-term rentals are taking out longer-term housing. Should that be? Is there a tax? Is there an extra fee there that helps support it? Now Simon's looking at me, but he wrote a very good op-ed piece on this whole issue. It was very good. But can you do that in a balanced way? You don't want to shut it down. You want to. We have a hospitality industry is a big thing here. A lot of people employed it, and we want to be careful with that, right? But is there a fee that is sustainable that could help fund that? Those are the kinds of things we're looking at on that. And then your last question was ADUs or accessory dwelling units. We think there's two big issues there. There's things like. The city policy on this, we think, is too restrictive. So even if you're in a neighborhood that has two-story homes in it and it's zoned 2 stories, then a guest house can't be 2 stories under the existing ordinance. Why not? You couldn't put it on top of your garage. Why not? So our idea is as long as the neighborhood's already zoned that way and accepting that, why can't if it's all single story, then you wouldn't. You're not going to change the character of the neighborhood. But could you make that more flexible? Or if there's clearly on-street parking, like in Acosta Solana, there is no shortage of on-street parking. Can't that parking spot be? Why does it have to be on-site, on the lot? Why do we don't want people to tear out their front yard to put in a parking pad? Why don't we just allow the on-street parking, right? So could we make it more flexible? Second big area is, how do you finance this thing? So I know Dion from Los Alamos, Silva from Los Alamos National Bank is here. He's on the task force, and we had a really good conversation the other day. Is could we come up with a way to help people finance accessory dwelling units? Because right now that's not easy to do, but we think there's probably an easier way to do it, right? So does that get to your question,
Yes,
Mayor?
thank you. We have about 1 minute for the next question.
Has the city's mobile integrated health office, or otherwise known as MIHO, helped with the homelessness problem?
Yes, I think that I did see him here earlier, Marcus. I think it has been a part of, because there's a referral source, and that is that once individuals are identified and they provide just an incredible service, it's getting the folks connected to the services. That's the key. You can't provide something that is in isolation and not be able to do the follow up. And so there has been a real effort of trying to work together. Those that, whether it's in the emergency shelters, and those need to be just short term. We need to get people, homeless need to be housed. They need homeless housing, innovative types of things, but also the individuals need to be addressed. I love the comment that was made by the Education Committee earlier about the fact if we can address in a trauma-informed way some of the stress and the issues that individuals face, whether they are children, whether they are adults, it will go a long way. Also, you can get, with some of just very small amounts of assistance, you can wind up deterring individuals from moving forward with negative types of behavior. And some of those are not real costly. We are notorious for having folks have access for cell phones, so that if they really do start having some thoughts that are not healthy for them, or if they just need to connect with someone, it is amazing what a cell phone will do. And the individuals, I am impressed, because they don't talk on the cell phone, they do texting. Texting is amazing. And so I thought that was quite, the question was earlier about having the phones, and the homeless have cell phones, okay? Because we can make them available, and that is a communication device. So yes, I think all of the social service agencies in our community really make an effort to connect with each other.
What assessment or study exists to determine what the quantitative needs are? For example, the number of beds needed for homeless people, the number of rental units needed, the number of home ownership opportunities needed.
Well, we're going to get that to you. No, we're still working on it. It's like, when you look at there's lots of work, and the city has done a lot of work. Alex has done a lot of work with a comprehensive plan that they do, and the plan they submit to the Mortgage Finance Authority. There's a lot of data, and we're assembling that. There's, not everything's not everyone's in agreement on what that is, right? So you hear from, 4,000 to 6,000 rental units are needed. I know that the Alex Ladd's research showed that 2,000 and something affordable rental units, right? So that are affordable, people below a certain income are needed, and the methodology was really good. I think that number is really solid. So we're still gathering that stuff. I think the one thing I would say, and Carol will say more about it than me, but is like I think the language of how many beds do we need for the homeless is the wrong question. I don't think it's shelter beds. I think it's permanent housing. It's getting people. It's not tolerating homelessness. It's escaping homelessness. And we need to think about housing units, but they also need supportive services, right? In order to make that transition. So I think we got to shift our thinking, and I've learned a lot from working with the homeless providers. It's been like very interesting and fun to learn about this, of that there's stuff that is really working on the ground, and some of the work that we're doing here in Santa Fe, it's best practices. The mayor asked me to be on a phone call with the Orlando administration that has reduced homelessness in Orlando, Florida, 50-something%, but it's doing it through permanent supportive housing. Right? That's the.
Yes, indeed. I think that what we're trying to do is to take a look at the fact of HUD's definitions of what is someone that is chronically homeless, what is someone that is literally homeless, what are those that are at risk for homelessness. But we have to also take into cultural aspects, because we are very much a multicultural community. Oftentimes it is just not acceptable within cultures that has children or adults that are sleeping in the streets, or that are sleeping in arroyos. And so once they are put up, whether it's in, an extra little place in the garage, or whether it's in a place not meant for habitation, it then falls out of the definition of homelessness. And we would like to see that changed. And we can do that with the different types of funding streams that we have. because we don't want to see anyone that is with housing. You can grow, you can do something that is identifies who you are, and also the same of moving folks into. And when we say permanent, I bet you none of you live in the very same place that you lived in when you were 20 years old. Well, maybe if you do, come to think of it. But a permanent means that it's yours. You have a key. You can invite in who you want. You can keep out who you want. And having it be supportive for those that have barriers. If they don't have barriers, or we're able to overcome those barriers, then it is basically, this is where I live. This is my home.
Okay.
Let me just real quickly add one thing to that, is that this is where the continuum of housing is really important, right? Because we can say, here's how many rental units we need, but the other number you will see when we finish our work is how many people have enough, who are renting today, have enough income to buy a home in Santa Fe. It's a lot of people. In Santa Fe and in 44 states, if you compare apples to apples, same square footage to same square footage, it is more affordable to purchase a home than it is to rent the same square footage. And that's partly because interest rates are so low and are really good. So it's like, so we oftentimes think, well, rental is always the affordable part of the spectrum, and then you move up top. It's not true. There's affordability throughout that thing. So what we think of as why a home is more expensive to buy than to rent is most of our experiences, we're moving from a one-bedroom apartment into a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a yard and a garage. Well, if you rent it, that'd be more expensive too. You're improving your housing type. So we need to look at that whole thing, and but not everyone can buy a home, right? Because they can't get a mortgage, so we got to work on those issues. So that's why we got to look at this. The spectrum is like, we can reduce the demand for rental housing if we increase the people that are getting into homes. But as I said before, as we are successful getting people out of homelessness, that's putting new pressure on the housing, the rental supply. So we got to look at this whole thing and make it keep in balance. So that's why it's taken us a while. We want to make sure we can present it in a comprehensive way that's meaningful.
Okay, we have about 10 other really good questions here that we don't have time to ask, but the mayor again will attempt to deal with those during his Facebook Live program.
First of all, this is if we spent the whole day on this, and maybe we'll come back and spend a whole day on it, we would still have 10 unanswered questions. This is absolutely critical for every part of the city, and I've said it in a number of occasions that the future of the city is going to run right through our land use department going forward. It's going to run right through our community services department going forward. It's going to be up to us to bring these pieces together and really have a coherent strategy. And I didn't want the conversation to end without pointing out that the committee's title intentionally was Housing and Livable Neighborhoods. That we're not simply talking about housing units in the abstract. We're talking about a vision of a city where housing and livable neighborhoods are put together so that people can find Santa Fe, the community they want to be a part of, the neighborhood they want to be a part of, a quality of life that they aspire to, and that the pieces fit together. That if you just look at numbers or a segment of it as a house, you've left out the part that really is the integrative piece where we're building neighborhoods where people want to live, put down roots, and have families. And I think the working group has looked at the action items that speak to all of those components for people in every part of our community. So many thanks. The work, as you've said, is not completed yet, and you're talking about continuing your work as well as a working group, and I can't thank you enough for tackling this project. Thank you very much.